In the glittering, fast-paced world of Lagos, Koyejo had everything he ever wanted: success, freedom, and independence. But when the one thing he had rejected came back to haunt him, he was forced to face a truth that shattered his world. It wasn't just his reputation at stake, but his heart. Koyejo Adebayo had everything: a well-established fashion empire, a brand that was growing rapidly, and the admiration of his peers. At 30, he was a man who believed he had it all figured out. He had no interest in settling down, no plans for marriage, and children seemed like a distant thought. Too much responsibility, too much risk. When he met Titi, a quiet yet confident fashion entrepreneur, he never expected that she would change the trajectory of his life. They had met through work at a fashion event, and over time, their conversations turned into dinners and late-night talks. Koyejo found her refreshing, grounded, and completely unlike the other women he had been with. She wasn't trying to win him over, she was simply herself. They had a brief affair, intense but short, and then, one evening, Titi told him she was pregnant. The news hit Koyejo like a ton of bricks. He wasn't prepared, he wasn't ready. The thought of fatherhood terrified him. His career, his freedom, his life, all felt at risk. "I can't do this, Titi," he said, pacing around his apartment as she sat silently, her hands on her stomach. "I am not ready to be a father. This is not in my plan." Titi, heartbroken but composed, tried to convince him that they could figure it out together, that they could raise the child as a family. But Koyejo, with his pride and ambition in full force, rejected her and the child without a second thought. He told her to get rid of it if she couldn't handle it alone. "I can't be part of this. I can't risk everything I've worked for," he told her coldly, never fully understanding the pain those words caused. Titi left, heartbroken, and chose to keep the pregnancy. She moved to a quieter part of Lagos to raise the child on her own, knowing that the road ahead would be difficult, but certain that it was the right decision for her. Life continued for Koyejo. His business boomed and he traveled internationally, expanding his brand. Yet, there was always a gnawing emptiness every time he saw a child with their father or heard a father's voice calling out in the streets. Something inside him twisted. He buried the feeling though, telling himself that his decision was the right one. After all, he had his freedom, his success. What more could he need? However, fate has a funny way of pushing people toward what they refuse to face. Titi, meanwhile, flourished in her own way. She became a successful single mother, managing both her career and raising Ayotunde, the boy who was the result of Koyejo's rejection. She never let Koyejo's absence define her life. She worked tirelessly, and Ayotunde grew into a sharp, inquisitive boy who was a natural at school and sports. Every now and then, Titi would think of Koyejo, but she had long accepted that it wasn't part of their world. She had no choice but to move on. 5 years passed. Then, Koyejo's world came crashing down. One evening, he received an email from a lawyer. The subject line read, "Legal notice regarding Ayotunde Adebayo." He opened the email with confusion, only to find a letter informing him that he had been named in a lawsuit for failure to provide financial and emotional support for his biological child. The letter also mentioned that Titi had requested an acknowledgement of his paternity in court. Koyejo was stunned. Why now? His first instinct was to ignore it, dismiss it as a misunderstanding. But when his lawyer confirmed the legitimacy of the case, the reality hit him. Titi wasn't asking for money or revenge. She was simply asking for him to acknowledge the child he had rejected. Titi's request wasn't just legal, it was personal. Koyejo had no choice but to face the child he had abandoned, but then came the twist he never saw coming. Koyejo received another call a week later. This time, it was from Titi herself. Titi, Koyejo's voice cracked with uncertainty. He had never been good at facing his mistakes. It's about Ayotunde, she said, her voice unusually calm. He is sick. He has been diagnosed with a rare condition. He needs treatment, and without it, his chances are slim. Koyejo felt his blood run cold. What do you mean? What's happening? Titi explained that Ayotunde had been in and out of the hospital for months. The doctors were unable to proceed without a formal paternity test confirming Koyejo's identity as the father. His biological father's medical history was crucial for Ayotunde's treatment. Without it, Ayotunde would not be eligible for critical medical care that could potentially save his life. The reality hit Koyejo hard. His first reaction was panic. What could he possibly do? The thought of a child he had rejected, now facing life-threatening illness, crushed him. He was forced to make the choice. Would he keep running from his responsibility, or would he face the truth and step up? With a heavy heart, he agreed to the paternity test, knowing that it could very well be too late. In the weeks that followed, the test results confirmed what Koyejo had feared. Ayotunde was indeed his son. The realization that he had abandoned his flesh and blood haunted him like a shadow he could never escape. But just as he was about to reach out to Titi, he received a devastating news. Ayotunde's condition had worsened. The boy was slipping away, and there was nothing more that could be done. Koyejo's world shattered. He had taken too long. He had waited too long to make amends, to be there for his son. The one thing he never thought he would regret, the one thing he had thought he could avoid, was now a permanent stain on his heart. Koyejo rushed to the hospital, hoping against hope that he hadn't lost his son forever. When he arrived, he found Titi by Ayotunde's bedside, her face streaked with tears, but filled with quiet strength. You came, she said, her voice a mix of relief and sorrow. You came just in time for him to know who you are. He has been asking for you, Koyejo. Ayotunde, frail and weak, opened his eyes and smiled faintly when he saw his father. The smile was barely there, but it was enough. In that moment, Koyejo knew that he had made the right decision. Too late, perhaps, but it was better than never at all. Titi turned to him, her eyes filled with pain and forgiveness. He knew who you were, Koyejo. He always did. You just had to be brave enough to show up. Koyejo learned that no amount of success, wealth, or freedom could replace the importance of family. He had rejected a gift, his own son, and in doing so had nearly lost him forever. The price of rejection, he realized, was far steeper than he could have ever imagined. Life had a way of forcing him to confront his mistakes, and the consequences of ignoring them were there. By the time Ayotunde passed away, Koyejo had learnt the harshest lesson of his life. Though he had been there at the end, his regrets would follow him for the rest of his days. The boy he had abandoned, the child he had refused to acknowledge, would always be a part of him. Not in the way he had imagined, but in the deepest part of his soul. And as Koyejo stood at Ayotunde's grave, he whispered a quiet apology to the wind. He would live with the consequences of his actions for the rest of his life. But in that moment, he had come to understand one painful truth. You cannot run from your responsibilities forever. Life has a way of making you face them, no matter how late. Rejection may seem like an easy way out, but it often comes with consequences that can change the course of your life. Sometimes it is not until it is almost too late that we realize the price of our decisions. Redemption is possible, but it is not without deep pain.